question before I get started today, a quick show of hands. Who here either works remotely themselves or works in a team not all based in the same location? Wow, more than I expected. Awesome. Okay. So those with your hands up, I hope today you might learn some extra tips and tricks to augment how you do your job day to day. Those with your hands down, I'm hoping today that you might get motivated, take some action, and maybe raise your hand the next time you're asked that question. So I'll start today with a pretty bold quote from Richard Branson. In 30 years' time, people are going to look back and wonder why offices ever existed. Now, in the past, I would have been pretty skeptical about this, but having worked remotely myself for the past 2 years, I now have to agree. Remote work is a game changer. The winds of change are blowing towards remote. The technology is now good enough, the internet connection speeds are fast enough, and the tools have never been better. And as this technology gets better and better, every year, the number of people joining this remote revolution is growing. So I'm hoping today, after leaving this talk, you will be prepared for the challenges that come with remote work and learn how to make it work for you and your team. So my name is Adam. I work on the Jira Service Desk team at Atlassian, and here is my team. So besides the unusual dress code you see here, one thing you may notice about this picture that's unusual is that I'm not actually in it. That's because my team here are based in Sydney, and I'm based in Europe, in the Netherlands. So how did this come about? Well, it was a bit of a journey. It all happened a couple of years ago. Let me fix up my mic here. So I used to be based in the Atlassian office in Sydney, and I was there for a number of years. And the service desk team was growing into a new sister office in Saigon, so I was there for a couple of months to help out. While I was there, as Shannon mentioned, I met my now Dutch partner, and I moved with her to the Netherlands. So for the past 2 years, all the while, I've been working from the Netherlands with my team in Sydney remotely, who are 8 to 10 long hours away. So today, I'm going to talk about my experience with this funny arrangement. I'll start off with why you should work remotely, or the problems I now see with co-location, and then I'll quickly go through the how-to of remote, tips and tricks, and the things to look out for and manage. And then the rest of the talk will be going through my personal experiences about working in a distributed team remotely, and the day-to-day work of building software in one of these teams as well. So why remote? Or what's wrong with everyone being together in the office? Well, first of all, it's very hard to get any work done in the office. Your focus time is broken down into these bite-sized piecemeal chunks. Have you ever finished a day at the office and thought, wow, I got nothing done today? It happened to me all the time. In fact, I used to come into my office 2 hours before the rest of my team just to get shit done. Because during the day, there's too many distractions. Things like Nerf gun battles. These happen at Atlassian all the time. Or people come to your desk asking you random questions and totally destroying your train of thought, which is a killer when you're a developer. It's really bad. And of course, also being dragged into unplanned meetings with no agenda that go on for longer than necessary as well. Now, each one of these distractions costs more than you'd think as well. According to a study done at the University of California, it takes an average of 25 minutes to return to the original task after an interruption. All these interruptions build up, and your day is destroyed by these. So besides this, getting to the office is also really bad for your health. According to an article on Slate.com called Your Commute is Killing You, where they gathered together various pieces of research from different universities, they found that the longer your commute, the greater the chance you have of developing obesity, insomnia, stress, neck pain, back pain, high blood pressure, divorce, and even death itself. So I think based on this, you'll agree with me that we should all do less commuting, and when you're remote, this is certainly the case. Next point on this is that all the best talent does not necessarily live near your office. So some companies can afford to relocate the best talent if the candidate agrees to this. Most companies can't afford to do this. And by forcing your staff to work from the same physical location, you severely limit the number of potential candidates you can hire. Say, for example, I'm starting a company here in Barcelona. If I don't open my recruitment policy to remote employees, then everyone that works for me has to live within this circle, roughly 1.5 hours driving time. But of course, if I open up my catchment pool to remote employees, here's Barcelona again, obviously my catchment area is much bigger and there's a much better chance of finding the best person for the job. So what else is good about this remote alternative to the office? Well, first of all, liberation. Not being stuck in this home office cycle is a really nice thing, and you can work wherever you feel the most productive. This is my home office where I work from most of every day, but not all day long. Sometimes I work in a local cafe, have a nice coffee. On occasion, when it's sunny, I work from outside in the park, which can be really nice as well. And sometimes I even work from the pub with a pint of the black stuff. Well, I am Irish after all. So these are actually the pictures I've taken of me working from a nice location just to piss off my teammates who are stuck in the office. So this freedom to work in cafes or workspaces or anywhere you feel productive can really provide extra energy and inspiration and keep you focused for longer during the day, I find as well. So the next good thing about this is focus. So if you work from home, you have less interruptions because you're not in the office and you get more shit done. I'll touch more on this later. And finally, we think commutes are bad, so having no commute means you live longer and happier. And I also find that it's much easier to get a better work-life balance too. So if you do some research online, there's a big hype machine that has built up about remote work, and it's typically positive stuff you see online. But in my experience, it's not actually all good. There are some problems you encounter, and the first one of which is loneliness. You are quite isolated when you work from home all day, and this can become a real problem. Besides this, you face challenges with communication as well. You have to learn how to wait for answers. In fact, your team has to relearn how to do communication because you haven't got these face-to-face chats you have in the office. And sometimes a 3-line conversation can take 3 days. Really annoying. So now let me show you how to overcome these drawbacks, and I'll bring you through some of my tips and advice on how to work remotely. So when I first got the go-ahead from my manager to become a remote member of my team, I did some research myself, and the impression I got from all these online blogs was that it was going to be kind of like this, on a tropical island, drinking a cocktail, doing some coding, lying in the sunshine, very nice. Except I didn't move to a tropical beach paradise. I moved to the Netherlands in October, so it's more like this. But at least this weather is good for coding. So when you're sheltered from the rain inside your house and you work from home, one important piece of advice to remember is to have a separate workspace. Keep the work part of your house separate from the living part of your house. This is to enforce the separation between home and work life, which can become blurred when you work from home. Close the door when you start working. I literally kiss my partner goodbye when I go into my room to start my day, just to enforce the separation for her and for me as well. And sometimes it is hard to explain this separation to certain members of my family. But at least with Tommy here, I could pick him up and move him somewhere else in the house. When my manager comes to my desk in my office, I can pick them up and move them somewhere else, but it's probably not the best career move. So yeah. Exercise is more important than ever when you work from home because, well, my personal experience is that if you're at home all day, you get less incidental exercise. You don't run to catch the bus, you don't walk to the train station, you don't cycle to the office like I used to do. And in my first 6 months after going remote, my waistline started to expand from this. It was pretty bad. And in the past year or so, I found that going for a run 3 times a week has meant my productivity, my mood, and my waistline have all improved as well. So this is something to keep in mind when you first go remote. Allow for extra time in your week to do some exercise. It's very important. And finally, and most importantly, don't ignore loneliness. So you do miss the day-to-day interactions and chats you have in the office. In fact, you go a bit mad at first. I certainly did. In fact, when I first went remote, I used to end up counting the seconds until my girlfriend came home from her job, meaning when she came in the door, my face kind of looked like this. Pretty scary for her. So tackle this problem head on. It can become a problem. Tackle it head on. This is not my dog. This is my cat, however, Tommy, who you met earlier. So getting a pet can really help when you're alone in the house all day, despite the distractions sometimes. A colleague of mine who's also remote at Atlassian got a dog for just the same reason. In fact, you find it's quite common for remote workers to have a pet just for some company in the house all day. Getting outside the house is also very important. So I make a point to work out from outside my house at least once a day, like here in Chummy Coffee in the town where I live in. It's a different kind of social interaction to what I get in the office, but it's a pretty good substitute, I find. If you want to find a good place to work from near where you live, there's an awesome website called workfrom.co. It's community created, and you can find places like cafes and libraries near where you live, and it lists things like Wi-Fi speeds, noise levels, etc. It's really, really useful. I used this yesterday to find a cafe to work from in Barcelona, and it was excellent Wi-Fi, and it worked really well there. You can also find co-working spaces, paid for co-working spaces via this site as well. And these are an excellent alternative if your home does not have an ideal place for a home office. Besides workfrom.co, there's awesome websites in different cities that are dedicated to finding these co-working spaces. There are services like WeWork that allow you to use and join offices and hot desks all over the world. You pay a subscription fee. And there's even a really awesome startup from New York called Spacious, which allows you to work from restaurants that are closed during the day. Really cool use of space there. Okay, so a quick recap on how we've gone so far. Remote work. There are good things, there are bad things, some things suck, but more things are better, in my opinion, than at the office. Working from home, separate your work part of your house from your home part of your house, very important. And finally, mind your mental health. Get some exercise, acknowledge and tackle loneliness, and get outside as well. Once per day is my advice on this. Okay, now I'm going to share my experiences and advice on working in a team remotely. Most of this also applies to working in or managing geographically distributed teams as well. So one of the most important aspects of a well-functioning team is communication. And this is especially true for remote teams. And there are two main forms of communication within teams. There's the old-fashioned synchronous, where you transmit and receive info at the same time. Think face-to-face chats in person or meetings in the office. And there's also asynchronous, where you transmit information when you're ready and you receive when it suits as well. Think email, HipChat chats, comments on Jira issues, that kind of stuff as well. And remote work means far more asynchronous. And now let me show you why that's actually a good thing. So async communication is awesome, first of all, for the extra focus time you get. Having interruptions when you want allow large stretches of this. If someone pings you on HipChat, you can choose to respond to their message when you're finished your current task, and you don't break your train of thought, and you get more stuff done that way. It's really, really good. Besides this, having a history of communication is also really good as well. You can find out why the hell you decided to pick a certain solution for technology that has caused a production incident by searching through your Confluence history or your HipChat history, which an advantage you don't get when you have an ad hoc meeting at someone's desk or that kind of stuff as well, so that's also really useful too. And besides that, having the time to digest and think before you respond to a communication can be really powerful as well, because often I find that your immediate response is not your best. It's quite common in a face-to-face chat or in a group chat in a meeting room that someone says the first thing that comes to their head, then afterwards you think of a better solution. But when you're talking like this in via HipChat or Confluence pages, you can think before you respond, and I find people give their best solutions faster, and you come to the conclusion of the conversation at the best conclusion faster overall as well compared to in-person meetings. In general, I find async is more effective for technical discussions around architecture and solution design also. The most well-known tool for async comms is, of course, email. But email is not good for collaboration in teams because each person has their own unique view of the inbox, and if someone new joins the company, they can't get all your emails, etc. as well. It's not very practical. In fact, pretty much all I use email for are notifications from Atlassian apps. But luckily for me, my company makes tools that greatly assist async communication. This is Atlassian's mission, to unleash the potential in every team. And this includes remote teams. So now let me show you how I use the tools that Atlassian makes for communication within my team. First up, we have HipChat, which is good for general coding discussions or discussions about pretty much anything. Jira Software is good for discussing a Jira issue in context or discussing a particular bug, epic, or story. Confluence is good for more high-level, broad architectural discussions or for documenting team practices or proposals. And finally, Bitbucket is good for discussing code in the context of pull requests or commits. So I'll start with chat. In past companies, I've used Google Talk or Skype. You may use Slack for your work. My team used HipChat, of course. And chat is really your lifeline when you're a remote member of a team because it's the first step you go to communicate with a team member. And it's also super useful in an asynchronous context as well. You can ask someone a question when they're offline, if they're asleep, and they can come online and respond to you or respond when it suits them, and vice versa as well. Of course, you also have rooms in HipChat as well. Slack channels is something similar to this. So in Atlassian, we use rooms for almost everything. Here you can see I've got a room open for my own team. I've got a room open for a particular office location to plan lunch, etc. I have 2 rooms open just for booze. Make of that what you will. And we even have a room for our remote workers as well, where we share things like our home office locations, that kind of stuff too. That's really, really nice. So rooms are very important for remote teams because it's the best way to still feel like one team or one company when you aren't all in the same physical location. Another feature of HipChat we use quite heavily are @mentions, which you might be familiar with. So here we are in my team room again. I can hear everybody in the room, so everybody in the room is notified. It's good for announcements across trios. And you can mention specific people as well, also super useful. So yeah, there's no difference to how we use HipChat now compared to before I was remote. It works pretty seamlessly for remote teams. Next up is Jira software. So I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with a Jira issue, which you can see here. So once again, here I'm creating an issue in my description. I mentioned Guido. It means that he becomes aware that the work I'm doing is going to affect his work. It all happens in context, and it's more effective than going to his desk because I can't do that. But also he has a record of communication, and he can get the notification when it suits him as well. Really useful. Of course, you can have conversations in Jira as well. So here you can see a couple of months ago, I had a conversation with a teammate in Sydney. It happened over a couple of course of 2 days. He was in Sydney, I'm in the Netherlands. It doesn't matter, the context is in context, and it's totally seamless for remote members of the team like me. Really useful. So Confluence is something that we use quite heavily in my team. And I'll show you now how I use Confluence recently to get help on a pretty tricky architectural design issue I was facing. So I was struggling to come up with an acceptable solution for a story. I created this page in Confluence to ask for help. And again, I use @mentions to mention Brad and Guido, the subject matter experts. And it means that when they come online, when it suits them, they're in Sydney, it doesn't matter. They can read the page and add their feedback, comments on the page. And here we can see Brad has given me a nice bridge pattern to use for my solution, and I'm unblocked. Really, really nice. So again, it works totally seamlessly for remote teams. In fact, we use Confluence more often now since I went remote than beforehand, but that's better in my opinion. Another way in which my team and I use Confluence is to create reference guides, like this one you see here for unit testing. Now, unit testing is something that developers are very strongly opinionated about, and we created this page and shared it with the whole team, and then you can see there was a big discussion on the page, lots of comments back and forth, arguments, discussions. The best thing about this conversation for me was I fully took part in it as a remote member. So it's a really nice way to come to a conclusion to basically define your team practices in a way that includes everybody, including remote members also as well. And finally, Bitbucket. There is no difference to the way we use Bitbucket now and before. And for communication, you can add comments, etc., and also @mentions too. So here you can see that I've @mentioned Brad and Guido again, telling them to ignore a certain part of the pull request. Once again, it all works pretty seamlessly for remote teams. So one thing that's common to how all these tools are used is writing. And being a good writer is very important for communication in remote teams because it's all too easy to give the wrong impression via text. You can't rely on tone or body language. Also, cultural differences, especially with team members from diverse locations, come into play here too. Take, for example, Cork in Ireland, where I'm from. In Cork, you can say, I will, yeah, and it means yes, I will definitely do that thing. But you can also say, I will, yeah, and it means no, I will definitely not do that thing. Same 3 words, totally different meaning, but in HipChat or via text, you can't tell the difference. So be mindful when you're writing to someone on HipChat or email, whatever else, of the words you use, and try to avoid ambiguity in cultural differences as well. Taking a step back now to synchronous communication, which still does happen in remote teams. So 2 main forms, first one of which is one-to-ones. For these, obviously, it's going to be a video chat. There are plenty of mature tools out there for this. Skype, Google Hangouts, loads more. My team and I use HipChat video. Here's me having a catch-up with Guido a couple of weeks ago, and it works really well for us. You still have meetings too, of course, with remote teams. They still happen. And typically for me, it's me by myself in the Netherlands and my team in a meeting room in Sydney. And for this, we use BlueJeans for the software size and Lifesize for the VC hardware in the offices. And here's how it looks, and it works really well again, especially BlueJeans with slow connections. It's really nice. But there are some things to consider when you have meetings with remote members. The first one of which is to have a fallback form of communication just in case your VC tech fails or your mic fails in your laptop or whatever else, just for diagnosing those problems that happen at the start of meetings, which can waste valuable time. Get your light right. So when I first went remote, I used to have in my old apartment a light behind my head that was bright, and it meant that my teammates could only see a black silhouette of my face. kind of scary, not very conducive to a natural conversation. So have some warm lighting that's in front of you. That works best, I find. Have a rule that only one person talks at a time during the meeting. Because if you have more than one conversation happening in the meeting room, for example, it's really annoying. All the remote participants just hear garbled noise. So this is a good rule to have. Interrupt as you would in person. There is a tendency when you're remote on a VC meeting up on the screen to be a bit more shy because there's a slight lag sometimes with communication. But I find that it's best not to be shy. If you have something important to say, just act as if you were in the same room. And if you clash with somebody else, it doesn't matter. Your point is also valid. Even though you're remote, it doesn't matter. Get over this and don't be shy. Don't mute your mic. So if you go online and read some advice on VC meetings in general, people generally say to mute your microphone if you're taking part remotely. I say don't do this because it creates a barrier to natural communication with your team. Say, for example, someone makes a joke in the meeting room and you want to laugh. It's not very natural for you to go, on mute, ha ha ha, mute again. It just doesn't work. So I'd say keep the barrier low to communication as low as possible and keep your microphone on, unless you have construction noise or kids in the background, of course. Face the camera. This one may seem obvious, but I've had plenty of examples myself in the past couple of years where I've seen people have their laptop screen open on the right, where the camera is there, and they're facing the screen in the middle, and when they talk to you, you see the corner of their head, and it's not a very natural way to have a conversation when someone is facing away from you. So pretty simple. Keep it in mind. Face the camera when you're in one of these meetings. And finally, don't multitask. When you're attending a meeting remotely, it's very tempting to start on your next task or check your email because no one's going to catch you, right? But don't do this. If a meeting doesn't apply to you, why are you there in the first place? So take part or don't take part, and don't do two things half-assed. So one last thing on communication with a team, and that is to lean towards over-communication over under-communication. Let me explain this with a quote from my former manager at Atlassian. If you say something 7 times, half your teammates say they heard it 1 time. I love this quote. It's especially true when you're not there in person. If you have an important message to get across, use multiple channels. Announce it in HipChat, comment on a ticket, write a blog post, even shout during a meeting. Don't be afraid to repeat yourself, because getting the message through is the most important thing. So staying on the theme of remote teamwork, lack of in-person contact you get when you go remote really reduces the opportunity to get to know your teammates. And knowing your teammates is important because it helps working better together and having empathy for each other. You have to make a deliberate effort to compensate for these lack of random conversations you have in the office. So the first way of doing this, and the best way in my opinion, is to schedule frequent one-on-one catch-ups with every member of your team, not just your manager or your reports. When you catch up, don't just chat about work. Catch up about what's happening in the office or outside, or your weekends, or soccer, or music, or wherever your shared interests lie. Doing this has led to me getting to know some of my teammates even better after going remote, so it's a really nice benefit. Of course, you also have group catch-ups via HipChat rooms or Slack channels as well. In my team room, I take part every morning, and it's good to discuss random stuff that's happening in your lives or in a team or whatever else. You're still part of the team when you do this. It's really good. Of course, also a nice alternative they have at Trello is they have a thing called Beer Bash. It's pretty much every Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, a big VC meeting. They all bring a beer, and it's an awesome, awesome idea. I love this as well. Something else you can do also is share your own life with your team as well. So occasionally, I share blog posts with my team on my life in the Netherlands. It's nice for them because they get some kind of insight into a different culture and how I'm getting on there. It's nice for me because often it's a good icebreaker to talk to someone new in my team in Sydney via VC chat or whatever else. So it's a good way to keep the connection strong between you and your teammates. Finally, and most importantly, go meet them in person. So again, a quick show of hands. Who here works on a distributed team and has never met one or more of your teammates? Okay, there's a small few of you. Well, you should, because it makes it much easier to get angry with them. It's true. It's especially true when new people join. So when I first went remote, my team, in the 5 months between me going remote and going back to Sydney for a visit, my team nearly doubled in size. And all these new teammates, until I went back to Sydney to see them, were just names on HipChat or icons on a screen. And it was very hard to know how they would respond to being challenged or how their technical ability was or their personality was and everything else. So I went to Sydney, met them in person, had a coffee, had a beer with them, and it made it so much easier to work with them. So I would recommend doing this at least once a year at the minimum, I would say. It's also possible to be present in other ways too. So this is not me, this is a cardboard cutout of me in Sydney that my team lead got made up to remind my teammates in Sydney that I'm still part of a team. And it's been quite effective as well, because everyone talks about it now. It's like, oh, there's Adam in the corner doing something. It's really good. Besides this, of course, it also means my teammates can show their love for me in ways they wouldn't do in person. They can dress me in random clothes they find in the office. You can have some fun, play some basketball. Here's me on defense, not doing a very good job, obviously. And finally, when they're bored of me, they can just dump me in the bin. Thanks, guys. So a quick recap on remote teamwork. First of all, async comms. Awesome tools make this possible and lean towards over-communication. Video and VC, face the camera and be engaged, be a part of the meeting. And finally, build empathy with your teammates, very important, catch up often, and meet in person on a semi-regular basis also. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the rough life cycle of how I build software remotely. I'll describe a typical sprint from planning to retros, and I'll go through each and show you how it works in a remote distributed team. Starting with, of course, sprint planning. So planning for us is a VC meeting. It's not possible asynchronously, I've found. We have it once a week. Before the meeting, our tickets are up to date. It's actually important to have this generally in a remote team. One person drives, it's all via VC, and here is how it looks. So on the left are the guys in Sydney, and Guido is driving on his laptop. On the right is me, and we're using Geo software for it, and that's pretty much it. No secrets here. Next up on a sprint journey are our morning stand-ups. So we used to do our stand-ups via VC, but having them asynchronously at the same time didn't really work because one party had to have them at an unusual time. For us, it was Sydney, having them at 5 p.m. It didn't work very well for them. It was too late in the day. So now we actually do this using HipChat. Not just HipChat, but using a nice add-on for HipChat called Stand-Up Report Bot, which is free on Marketplace right now. So how it works is you type in /standup, type in yesterday I did this, today I did this, whatever you want. And once everyone has submitted their stand-up reports, then you get a nice overview of what everybody's working on for that day. Something similar exists for Slack as well, I understand. So yeah, that's how we do stand-ups. It works very well for us. Now on to the most important part of the sprint, the part I get paid for, which is actually coding. So I'll start with a fact. Having long stretches of focus time makes coding so much more enjoyable. It's fucking awesome. It's the most enjoyable aspect of working as a developer remotely. These long periods of total focus are like heaven for developers. But it also means you gotta make sure you don't burn your brain out too quickly, which happened to me at the start, actually. And the technique I use for this is called the Pomodoro Technique. It's a time management philosophy invented by a guy called Francesco Cirillo, and here's how it works. You do a block of work for 25 minutes, say. It's an atomic piece of work. It cannot be interrupted, and this is what a Pomodoro is. Then you take a 5-minute break, play with your cat, have a cup of tea, take a bathroom break, do the same thing again. After 4 of these work sections, you take a longer break, and then you start over. That's pretty much it. These times didn't work too well for me. They're a bit short, so I did some experimentation, and I find now doing 50 minutes of work and a 10-minute break is what works best for me. And I find that if I stick to this technique through my whole week, I end up with 30 hours of uninterrupted focus time in a single week, far more than I used to get in the office. It's really awesome. The other 10 hours of my week are spent in meetings or catch-ups, etc. as well. So we're getting there with a sprint journey. Now we have, next up is pair programming. So my team does occasionally pair on problems, not everyday things. And it is possible to pair remotely. Obviously, you need good tools for this. There are a few different tools out there available now, such as Screen Hero or Cloud9. The one that me and my team use is called Floobits. Floobits is awesome because it has plugins for a number of different editors that allow remote pairing. So let's see it in action. On top is me coding in my favorite editor. On the bottom is Tommy, who I'm pairing with, my cat, coding in his favorite editor. And here we can see that I type some code into my editor, and you'll see it's almost in real time, automatically reflected in his editor. Very, very nice. We have a VC video chat, like a chat session open at the same time as well to discuss things. One nice feature of Floobits as well is follow mode, which you can see here, where Tommy has clicked the button next to my face, and I can show him he clicks this button, and that means that I can navigate him to different parts of the code base and guide him through some code or some steps as well. Also really, really nice. Okay, that's repairing done. We've written our code. Now it's time to actually review this code. So again, in remote teams, I mentioned before, code reviews don't work any differently to co-located teams as long as you're using a tool such as Bitbucket, which you can see here, or Fisheye Crucible, or GitHub. It's a naturally asynchronous operation, so it works just as well in a remote team. In fact, in some ways, it works better because I find that I can do my coding during the day and then submit my pull requests, my code reviews to my teammates in Sydney, and it means that I go offline, they do all the review of my code, and when I come in the next morning, all my feedback is there, I can address it straight away, and vice versa as well. And it means that there's more blocks in a 24-hour day being used up for this code cycle, and the whole thing can move faster. It's a nice extra benefit. So on to the last step of our sprint, retros, where we analyze the past sprint and see how we can do things better. So these are possible by a VC meeting, but there's a really nice tool you can use for these for remote teams in particular, and it's Confluence with an add-on for Confluence called Agile Retrospectives. It's available now in Marketplace for Confluence Cloud. It's coming soon for server, I understand. And now I'll give you a quick demo of how it works. So here we are in our retros page. We have 2 members taking part. We share this page with the team. It's Monica and Luis. And each person individually adds their input to the retro. What went well, what didn't go well. So each person is on their own laptop and doing this on their own account in Confluence. And once everyone has added all their input, on to the next step, which is to remove any duplicates that you find. It's pretty simple how this works. You just group them together by drag and drop, like this. And once you've done that, on to the next step, which is to vote on what you think the most important items are. Again, it's an individual vote, the way retros should be. And once everyone has finished their voting, everyone's ready, on to the next and most important step, which is to create your action items from the retrospective, things to take into the next sprint to improve how you work. You can also assign action items to members of your team as well, very important for accountability. And finally, once you've created all your action items, yep, lots of good stuff there, you want to the final step, which is you finish your retro, and you have this nice summary page created in Confluence for you, showing what didn't go well, what went well, and most importantly, the action items as well. You can even filter these action items by assignee as well. Really cool. Okay, so we finished our sprint. Quick recap on building software in a remote team. First of all, you can do it all. All the steps of the software dev process are possible remotely, as long as you have the right tools. As with communication, these are more important than ever when you're remote. Finally, asynchronous can help, and some things like stand-ups, coding, and code review actually work better remotely. So before we all go grab coffee together after this talk, here are my 3 key takeaways from what I've discussed today. Number 1, adjusting to remote work requires deliberate effort. You can't just plonk your laptop on your kitchen table and away you go. You have to work at this. So separate your work area, mind your mental health, and get outside as well. Number 2, it's possible to build a strong team with remote members. My experience in the past 2 years proves this, because the tools are now available to make remote communication work. So make the extra effort to get to know your team, have one-on-one catch-ups, and go meet them in person as well. And number 3, all the steps of the software dev process are possible remotely, as long as you have the right tools. So sprint planning, stand-ups, code review, retrospectives, remote is not a barrier for these. In fact, a lot of these things actually work better when you're remote. So one last thing. If you're interested in remote work and there's anything you remember from this talk, it should be to buy this book. It's called Remote, Office Not Required, and it's kind of the unofficial Bible for remote workers. Here is one of my favorite quotes from this book. Remote work is here, and it's here to stay. The only question is whether you'll be part of the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, or the laggards. So I hope today I've convinced you to join me in being one of these early adopters, and I hope I've encouraged you to consider remote work for your current or future role, or if you're building a team, to consider including remote members in that team. So you too can ride the winds of change and embrace remote working. Thank you.